October 31st, a night of horror, tricks, treats, monsters, and goblins. The night when the veil between the world of living and dead is at its thinnest and all hell breaks loose. So lock your doors, grab your popcorn balls and hard cider, light your jack-o'-lanterns and join us as we dig up the truth about Halloween. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Halloween special of the Spiritually Awakened Mom. I'm your host, Stacey V, and in this episode, I'll be sharing the origins of Halloween and some of its traditions, and then I'll turn it over to Chris to share the astrology of Halloween and Samhain traditions, followed by Crystal, who will be discussing the science of fear. While Halloween does have many traditions that date back to ancient times, surprisingly, much of the holiday traditions we practice today have only been around for the last century. No doubt you've heard some version of a story of Halloween that is about worshiping the devil, but the truth is many of the rituals we see today have been embraced by the Catholic Christians since the Middle Ages. But this day has been celebrated in many different cultures for thousands of years. It's actually pretty difficult to determine exactly what is Christian and what is pre-Christian, as many of the old traditions were adopted in some way during the rise of the Roman Catholic Church. In pre-Christian Rome, the festival of Lemuria, known as the Roman Festival of the Dead, was held every year on the 9th, 11th, and 13th of May. During this time, the Romans would give offerings and prepare feasts to honor their dead and commune with Roman deities. It was custom to exorcise the malevolent spirits from their homes during this time as well. And I found one ritual that's just a little bit odd. They would do certain chants accompanied by spitting black beans out your door, while the other participants in the ritual would bang copper pots to scare the spirits out of the house. It was believed that the spirits would follow the beans and leave the living alone, a method severely underutilized by the ghost hunting community of today. Lemuria was later Christianized in the early 600s. The official date changed to May 13, and it was renamed the Feast of All Saints' Day to honor the saints of the church. People were even encouraged to dress up as their favorite saint. I can only imagine what it was like in ancient Rome, costume shopping as a woman. I can't decide between sexy Holy Mother and sexy St. Catherine. Why are the costumes sexy? This is a church holiday. Moving on to the 10th century, when St. Patrick brought Christianity to Ireland. Halloween further evolved with influences of Samhain, the Celtic three-day festival of the dead that began on the October 31st. For them, it was a time to give thanks for their harvest, honoring their dead, and even foretelling the future. And today, we still practice many of their traditions like festivals, bonfires, apple bobbing, and dressing like monsters and goblins. Because many Irish continue to celebrate Samhain long after the Christian conversion, the church decided to move its current celebration in May to align with the Celtic traditions. 3 days of Celtic festival became 3 days of Christian ritual. All Hallows Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day became known as the All Hallowtide, and several other variations eventually becoming what we know as Halloween. In the 14th century, the church introduced a practice called souling, meant to encourage the Christian duty of charity. Children of the poor would go door to door, offering prayers for souls in purgatory in exchange for soul cakes. And these were little spice cakes that typically had a cross stamped into the top. Soul cake, pray you, good mistress of soul cake. 1 for Peter, 2 for Paul, 3 for him who made us all. No great wonder why that died. It just doesn't have the ring to it that trick or treat, smell my feet does. Eventually, this tradition morphed in with Christmas, and the prayers were changed to carols, and guising, where kids dressed up in costumes and asked for coins or food, became more popular on Halloween. Those who gave to geysers could expect good fortune, and those who didn't were served misfortune. Now, what mom doesn't know how impatient kids can be? No surprise, it was pretty hard for some of them to wait for the Lord to deliver his justice, and they took it upon themselves to deliver it on their own. By the early 1900s, The night before Halloween was deemed mischief night, a night of hardcore pranking. And no, I'm not just talking the typical eggs and TP. We're talking outright vandalism, tipping outhouses, unhinging gates, broken windows, and the list goes on. I remember stories of my grandpa's pranks. He actually didn't tip the jack-o'-lantern, or sorry, the outhouse. He used to move it back a few feet so that when someone went in the middle of the night, they wouldn't notice it was tampered with and fall in the pit. Yum. And it even got more out of hand during the Great Depression with growing violence and mass looting. Many cities considered canceling the holiday festivities. And so, in an effort to stop the insanity, people started offering treats to the kids in an effort to bribe them to leave their property alone. And soon after, trick-or-treating became a mainstream tradition. Now, you'd think that Halloween in some way would have been a tradition that came to America with the Pilgrims, but that's not the case. The Pilgrims were Puritans, separating themselves from the Catholic Church. Since many Catholic holidays were originally appropriated from pagan traditions, and Puritans were all about a pure Church of God, Catholic holidays were not celebrated. And actually, here's where most of the links to the devil come from, by the way. Accusing someone of witchcraft is not anything new. It's been religious propaganda for centuries, meant to demonize the old ways and basically scare people to the new. Puritan society is a great example of how effective this propaganda was. I think Salem is a great example of religious propaganda taken a bit too far. Pilgrims landed in Plymouth in 1620, and a mere 72 years later, and mass hysteria erupts 60 miles from the original source of the propaganda. 200 plus souls were accused and 20 women lost their lives. But when we think of Halloween, it's hard not to mention Salem, as it has become a staple of Halloween in America today. So how did Halloween get to America if it didn't come with the Pilgrims? We have another tragedy to thank for that: the Irish potato famine. In the mid-1800s, it brought thousands upon thousands of Irish to our shores, searching for a better life, and with them came their traditions. By the early 1900s, Halloween celebrations were popping up all over the US and Canada. And in 1858, the first Halloween was celebrated in the White House by President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Along with the Irish, the 1800s brought us Victorian literature, and with macabre characters like Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, came a new era of horror to add to the hype of Halloween. And soon after the arrival of Hollywood, the holiday began to grow into the multi-billion-dollar industry we see today. Nearly 600 million pounds of Halloween candy is purchased every year in the US. That's over $2 billion on candy alone, spent just in the US. Although I can't say how much of that actually made it to the candy dish on Halloween night. You know who you are. It's me too. We all know there are creeps out there, and that's why we check our kids' candy. And if you scour the internet, you can find a few cases of razor blades found in apples and candy tampering, but one will stand out from the rest. In 1964, Long Island housewife Helen File took it upon herself to punish children she thought were too old to trick or treat. She dropped arsenic pellets into the candy bags of anyone she decided was over trick-or-treating age. Meanwhile, her own sons, who were 15 and 16 at the time, were out trick-or-treating. Ellen was charged with child endangerment, to which she pled guilty, and she spent 2 years in prison. Talk about a Karen move. I'd say the original, but then we'd probably call them Helen's. But is there an age limit? Of the 50 states, Illinois is the only one. Trick-or-treating over the age of 13 in this state will cost you up to $1,000 in fines if you get caught. Other weird trick-or-treating laws I found. Did you know it's illegal to dress as a priest in Alabama, or that you could be fined up to $1,000 for using silly string on Halloween in California. And now on to weird shit we do with produce on Halloween, like apple popping. Everyone knows that this is the least favorite booth at the carnival. Nobody wants to ruin their makeup or take their mask off. Boring. Who wants a lousy apple when you got to dive in and grab it with your teeth, when every other booth is handing out mountains of candy? Now, this is a tradition that originated with the Celtic Samhain, although we don't do it right. And that's probably why I think it sucks. Did you know that an apple bob done right can tell your future? Well, more specifically, the woman you'll marry. That's right. Apple bobbing is for the boys. Now, how it's done correctly is traditionally young Celtic girls would write their name on the bottom of an apple and place it in the barrel of water. Then the boys would put their hands behind their back and try to get the apple with their teeth. The name on the apple they retrieved had the name of their future wife. And just so the ladies don't feel left out, there is an apple tradition for the girls too. It's called a Scottish apple wedding. And it's a tradition where the single ladies would peel an apple in one long strand and then take that peel and throw it over their shoulder. Whatever letter of the alphabet the peel resembled, when it hit the floor, was the first letter of the first name of their future husband. And as you know, I am the only single lady here, so I took it upon myself to try it. First of all, I'm going to say it's really difficult to get that peel in one continuous piece. And I actually ended up cheating and using my KitchenAid peeler attachment, which I think kind of skewed the results because I got nothing even remotely resembling a letter. It just was like a blob. So I took the longest peel that I had from doing it by hand and I threw it over my shoulder and I got an O, which conveniently is the first letter of Oliver, my sweet little baby dog, and the love of my life. So maybe it is possible. I've also heard that if a lady takes a bite out of the apple and puts it under her pillow, that she will dream about her soulmate. And I didn't do that part because it just sounded sticky. All right. Now, in other weird shit we do with produce on Halloween, pumpkin carving. But where did it come from? As a kid, every fall, we go to pick pumpkins and take them home and carve them into weird and scary faces and then set them out on our front porch. And I never really questioned where that tradition came from. And neither did my super religious family, apparently, because the reason why we do it is a lot darker than you would think. And this one actually involves the devil, but not worshiping him. It's the legend of the jack-o'-lantern has been around for over a millennia and began in Ireland. The lore is of a man called Stingy Jack. He was a drunk, a liar, a thief, a manipulative asshole with no morals or ethics. A guy who makes every ex-husband look like a winner, who said that his soul was so black that the devil himself was jealous. One night, as Jack was stumbling his way home from the bar, he was approached by the devil. The devil told him he was there to take his soul, but Jack managed to convince him to have one last drink before they went to hell. So they went back to the bar. Jack ordered a drink, and when he was done, he said to the devil, "Well, the least you can do is pay for my drink." And the devil, looking confused, said to Jack, "I don't carry money, I'm the devil." Somehow Jack convinced the devil to turn himself into a silver coin, saying, "Once the bartender's not looking, you can just turn yourself back and take me off to hell." So the devil agreed and turned himself into a coin. But instead of paying, Jack slipped the coin into his pocket where he had a crucifix, which trapped the devil in coin form. Jack then made a deal with the devil to let him live another 10 years in exchange for his freedom. But 10 years of boozing and trickery went pretty quickly, and soon enough, the devil was at Jack's door, ready to take him to hell. And as they were leaving, Jack begged the devil to let him have one last bite to eat before he got to hell. And at first the devil said, "Oh no, I know what you did last time. I'm falling for that again." But Jack pointed out an apple in a nearby tree, and the devil agreed and climbed up the tree to get the apple. While he was up there, Jack surrounded the tree with crosses and again trapped the devil. And once again, a deal was struck. Jack would release him in exchange. The devil would never claim his soul for hell. A few years passed, and finally, the years of alcohol abuse caught up to him, and Jack died. And when he met St. Peter at the gates, obviously that jerk was turned away and sent down to hell. When he got there, the devil was waiting for him at the gates. Jack begged the devil to open the gates and let him in so he'd have some place to go. But the devil said, sorry, man, I made a deal with you to never collect your soul, and I honor my deals. So Jack's soul was doomed to wander the earth forever. As a parting gift, the devil gave Jack a single ember of fire, which he carried in a hollowed out turnip. Not sure why a turnip, but to this day, on All Hallows Eve, legend has it, you can still see Jack's glowing light wandering through the night, looking for other souls to join him in his misery. And so, what do turnips have to do with pumpkin carving? Well, traditionally, the Irish would carve turnips or potatoes to place them in the window or near their door to frighten the evil spirits away. But soon after coming to America, they found a new fruit to mutilate. And today, 33 million pumpkins are lovingly carved each year in the US.
Awesome. That was amazing. I enjoyed listening to all your stories and so cool. I wanted to comment on what you said about the boys apple bobbing for a maiden.
Yeah.
And that was so cool because immediately when you said that, I was like, oh, apples, they represent Venus. So Venus are the ultimate representation through fruit in an apple. Um, so since I'm going to bring the astrological part, as you know, I always turn everything into astrology, meaning of sorts. And yeah, I just imagine it's like, oh, they're like bobbing for their Venus. So my part is I'm going to be talking about astrology connection and Samhain and also Wiccan traditions, because some Celtic and Wiccan traditions and pagan traditions, they kind of all overlap, but I'm going to more focus on Samhain. Now, astrologically, during this period, the sun is transiting the sign of Scorpio, which we already know. Anyone here that knows about astrology, this sign is very deep. It's very transformational. Natives that have planets in the sign of Scorpio, they're always into the occult, some sort, or superstitious, or believe in signs. They have their mystical antennas up and they really, really believe in the unseen. So it's not a surprise that Halloween is actually something that is celebrated during this time. However, in my research, what I found very interesting are the fairies and Halloween. So there's actually something that I saw on Gaia, and this is a few months back, and it was with Sarah Cosme, and she is a QHHT practitioner, and she mentioned something about regressing a woman that goes back to a Native American life. And when the Europeans came to the Americas and the whole process of what they did to the natives. And one thing that was mentioned during the regression by this person, as she was an elder, she regressed to be an elder in this native community, is that the European people, so the native European people, had lost their spiritual connection to what they believed was magical. And this is due to the new practices coming in, like religion. And one of the connections that they had was the connections to fairies and leprechauns and trolls and all that. So fairies have this bad reputation of making your dreams come true. And this makes me think of Tinkerbell, but then also having a temper and being tricky. So they enforce that balance, like not just all good and not just all bad. but they're quite magical. And in losing this connection to fairies, what was happening during this time is that as the veil is thinning, we end up having more connection to the things that are unseen or unknown or unnoticed. And it's said that fairies are tiny and some can see them and some can't. So during this time, they took this period to make sure that the European man or the European natives would lose their connection, their spiritual connection through their natural folk tales and fairy tales. So then they could be able to be more normalized to the new the new agenda and do really embrace the agenda of fear. So through fear, fear of the unknown, which is also a theme of Scorpio, they slowly stop leaving their spiritual roots. And as they forget about the fairies, the leprechauns, the trolls, then at that point, they're no longer having this connection. So for Halloween, they were kind of repelling all that magic. So like that, they won't be cursed. They won't be, I guess, like having like a streak of bad luck and things like that. So in listening to this episode, I got all these downloads and I was like, whoa, that totally makes sense. So I encourage you to listen to that episode after. It's with Regina Meredith. It's very interesting how she speaks about the natives of Europe losing their magical connection, but this is all rooted to the Halloween holiday. Everything that Stacey has mentioned and more, right? Like she gave you like this timeline of the things that happened, but really the root of this holiday being honored by the new the new way of living now. I don't want to label it, I don't want to offend anyone because I am religious and I am Catholic, so I'm not trying to put down religion in any way, but there are some beliefs that are more man-made versus like coming from the heart. So those beliefs that tend to control us and cause fear and also limit our abundance, like limit our ability to think that we're abundant beings, those limits allow us to lose our magic. And the connection there was as they lose their magic, people listen more. So they wanted to put things out that would scare the fairies, scare the trolls, scare the bad spirits. And if they don't have this connection, this beautiful connection to these trolls, leprechauns, gnomes, fairies, then slowly that disappears from their life and they no longer have that blessing, like that, luck of the Irish or whatever. They those nice, cute sayings that come with these tales. So I found that interesting because it totally like makes sense with everything else that Stacey was mentioning about the traditions and how you're using things to scare the magic versus welcome the magic in. So one of the things that I want to invite you to do is welcome your magic during this time. Now the veil is super thin. And this is why these creatures had the ability to connect with us spiritually, because as the sun is making its way, like it's at its halfway point, making its way to the underworld, it's unlocking that door and allowing a more open connection. It's like a portal of sorts to the unseen, to the unknown, to the things that you feel but you can't explain. So as the sun transits the sign of Scorpio, you want to connect with your ancestors, you want to connect with any spiritual practices that you had or were passed down, like all these beautiful things that Stacey mentioned, that we've created, like trick-or-treating and pumpkin carving and all these things that we created. They become traditions. So what's your tradition? In my culture, we celebrate the Day of the Dead, where we create beautiful altars for our past loved ones. And there's more significant than just like creating the altar. It's a connection to honor where we came from. And we take real big pride, not just to honor the person, but honor what they did, their legacy. So honor if they were carpenters or farmers or entrepreneurs, whatever they did, and how their merits affected us and everything that they did, how that influenced our life now. So we then honor them. So they have this place in our tree. And that's one of the traditions that I love to do. I light a candle. I put out pan de muerto, which is a bread that we bake for the dead. And then you can put their favorite items on the table on the altar. Like for my grandpa, he liked to drink. So I would put a little shot of tequila, little things like that. So that's what I'm going to be doing, setting that up. But then I'm American. So I also celebrate Halloween because why not contribute to that billion-dollar industry? um, and eat candies as well. But I try to make sure there's this honoring of sorts during this time because I do feel the energy. Now, this Halloween in particular is extra special. As an astrologer, when you analyze a chart or an event chart, you want to see the layout of everything, what's happening, how the planets are interacting with themselves. But first and foremost, what is the sun lunar phase? And this particular Halloween, now, this podcast will be good for any time that you listen to it because Stacey provided a lot of good information that's not just going to be tied to this event, but this is kind of why we chose to record this podcast during a lunar eclipse because the moon is a big deal. If we think of all the like advertisements and pictures that represent Halloween, there's usually a full moon. So a lunar eclipse is a charged up full moon, and we're having a lunar eclipse today. It's actually perfecting at 1:24 p.m. PST in Los Angeles, California, and we have the sun sitting at 5 degrees in Scorpio. We have the moon sitting at 5 degrees in Taurus. And the lunar phase of the Halloween day will tell you how easy it's going to be for you to get these spiritual downloads. And this is going to affect the masses. And honestly, up until today, I feel like I've been in this time warp. I kept on telling everyone around me, I pretty much always have everything together. I have everything in order. But it wasn't just me because other people that were changing their schedule would then affect what I was doing. And then I would adjust to that. But then I would drop the ball somewhere because I didn't check certain things or I agreed to a reschedule when I shouldn't have. And it was just crazy. And one of the things that drives me crazy is going off my calendar. I have a Virgo moon and a Pisces sun, and my Virgo moon regulates my Pisces sun by using a calendar. And I'm not a stickler to always using it, but if I don't, I see this Pisces blurry, not figuring things out, like being in a time loop activate, like this energy activated me. And I'm like, oh, I'm losing it. So this week for me, the eclipse for sure, eclipse season has been in full effect. So I'm not sure how many people are feeling this. And that's how I felt the effect. But other people might feel a strong connection to spooky things, to the unknown, to things that are not explained or mysteries. And I want to give an FYI to everyone because the veil is thin during this time. You want to use your protection stones or wear them, your either red bracelet, anything that you charge with the sun, because the sun makes you a beacon of light. And during, like, as you're wearing it throughout the day and even at night, because remember, the sun is what is providing the light to the moon. So it's a reflection to the moon. So that stone that you're carrying is actually making you the beacon of light and then reflecting it to the moon as well. So like that, you're protecting yourself. I advising everyone to do this because a lot of my clients reached out to me letting me know that there's weird things happening. Like one of them got approached while she was on the phone with her friend by a psychic lady saying, you have a soul attached to you and you need a cleansing, and I could give you that cleansing. And of course, a lot of people could fall for it. Luckily, this client didn't, because she knows, because I've advised people about this. It is extremely unethical to just go up to people and say, hey, I see a spirit on you. I believe in karma, and that's a super karmic move. I'm very careful with my readings for that reason, because anything that we do creates karma, and there's some that's, just little things, little bumps on the road, that's fine, but then there's major karma, and I have to make sure that when I do a reading, I'm completely ethical and not putting in things or bringing things from their subconscious into their awareness that they're not ready for, because everything that they're going to hear that's good in my reading will be out the door, and they're only going to hyper focus on the one negative bad thing. But that's because humans, we have the tendency to focus on fear, which is another theme of Scorpio. Fear, the unknown, the insecure, right? Like all the things that we can't control, because Scorpio likes to control. We want to get to the bottom of it to control it. So then you're going to hyper focus on this because it's a survival mechanism. This is how we survived. So fear is not completely bad. Without fear, we wouldn't exist. But with too much fear, we can believe people that come up to us and say, you have an evil spirit around you. Let me cleanse that for you. Oh, by the way, this is going to be $50. And it's like, wait a minute, I wasn't soliciting you. There's times you could go solicit a reader, a psychic reader, a hypnotherapist, an astrologer, and that's good and dandy. But if someone's approaching you and saying, hey, you have this, no, don't open your aura to that. Don't invite that. Immediately, if that happens, call in your guides. I like to use Archangel Michael and his shield and protect myself. And you just want to go ahead and chop any cords. You just say that and imagine yourself holding his shield and he's behind you, and you tell him no thank you, and you send all their energy back to them, because we shouldn't allow ourselves to be influenced by other people's fear mongering and then change like our entire mood of the day. Because I'm sure my client didn't feel well after that. She was just like mind boggled, like what just happened? This is again like that time warp energy, which I'm seeing with Venus opposing Neptune this time, and then also the eclipse and Jupiter close to the moon, expanding everything, over exaggerating. I mean, Jupiter, it gives good doses of abundance, but he can also amplify things that are negative. This eclipse is not negative of sorts, but it's very packed with emotions and very deep connection. So that's why it's easy for us to connect to the unknown, and we can develop our spiritual craft during this time. We can start talking to fairies again. And I love fairies. Tinkerbell was my fave. I mean, her attitude, everything about her, my fave. The other one, the mer people, so mermaids, another a folklore that came from the Irish, I believe. Yeah, it was the Irish. So, or Scottish. I'll have to do some research of that on that, but I believe it was the Irish, or the Irish have the sirens, which are similar to the mermaids. I'll check on that. But either way, it's our time to connect. We can start reading about this or listening to a podcast on the mystery of Halloween, just like you're doing now. Lastly, the thing we want to focus on is the moon, because the moon's cyclical connection to Halloween can let us know how enriching the experience will be or how difficult this time can be for you. And having an eclipse on a day that's celebrated and known to have this vortex of energy open up to the unknown, where the veil is thinning and we're able to connect easier. We just have to make sure that we regulate our emotions, because they're just going to be, our psychic antenna is like tuning in 100%. And you want to make sure you're not taking in other people's fears, traumas, worries, because that's also what happens with empathic people. We kind of just, we're sponges. We just absorb everything. So the moon phase is very, very important during this time. Just happens that we have a eclipse happening around the time that Halloween is also happening. I mean, it's only 3 days away at this point. So we're just kind of wrapping up that eclipse energy. So you want to make sure that you are protecting yourself. So the eclipse doesn't happen on Halloween. The eclipse is happening as we're filming this, but it's still within eclipse season. It doesn't end until we have another lunation, which would be the new moon in Scorpio, and that kind of finishes off eclipse season for us this year. So stay safe out there. Wear your protection braces, crystals, and really embrace the magic of this time by connecting to your ancestors, or just kind of diving deep into your astrological studies. Sit there and in meditation and look at your eighth house. The eighth house is connected to this energy. So look at your eighth house. Look also towards your Scorpio house. And if you happen to be eighth house Scorpio cusp, then you have the job that it's an easier job for you, because you're not looking at two areas, but find the connection between them. In my case, my Scorpio house is the fourth house, and my eighth house is Pisces. So through my ancestors, I find a more enriching connection during this time, because the fourth house represents your mother line, and the eighth house is that connection to death. And obviously, ancestors, they've lived, they can be your grandparents that passed, or even great grandparents. So through them, I find more enriching connections to my everyday to day practices. And I also continue on with my familial traditions, and I'm teaching these traditions to my children. So I want to wish everyone a very safe Halloween, and whatever it is that you're doing to really jump on that wave, and instead of being confused and kind of veered in different directions, like really take advantage of this time and craft your spiritual connection. And yeah, learn a little astrology on the way.
All right, that was super interesting. And Crystal, first on yours, the downloads that I was getting myself and what you were talking about, and the astrological energy going on this weekend. We have very similar birth charts in the fact that our rising sign is both Leo. So the eighth and the fourth house for both of us are the same. I've had some epiphanies through tarot card readings yesterday that all align with the mother line, death, intuitive practices, and connecting with a very specific ancestor, actually, to help me deep dive into my ability to connect with the other side. So that was very enlightening for me. And Stacey, as soon as you brought up Illinois, I am a native of Illinois. I was born and raised there. And I totally did not know that there was a law that we were not allowed to trick or treat past the age of 13, nor the fact that there was a fine with it. So I'm gonna have to let my brother, who has young kids there, that hey, watch your boys, because him and I definitely trick or treated past the age of 13. And fun fact, so in the state of Illinois, there's a small town. I was born there, Elgin, and they actually, it's so funny, have a ordinance in their bylaws that is called the ugly law. There is a curfew in that town for ugly people, that you can't be out past that time. So that's pretty funny. But now to deep dive into fear and what fear is, what constitutes a fear, what does our body do and our mind do when we get scared? What are those chemicals all rush us into? And then why, even though we are scared of this, let's say a haunted house, a horror movie, a roller coaster, why do we get addicted to going back to these things, even though it gives us this fear, this deep rush through our body? Well, let me explain this to you guys. So first off, what constitutes the fear factor? What do you have to have? Well, there has to be a feeling of a threat. Now, and that threat is going to come from either a person, place, thing, event, a feeling, spookiness that just runs through your spine. Well, fear, it starts out in your amygdala, which is your arousal feeder center. And then that starts to trigger your fight or flight, which is released through your adrenal glands, which then sends out two stress hormones, your adrenaline and your cortisol. Now, adrenaline is going to trigger rushes of dopamine and endorphins. Well, the cortisol is going to give you that feel-good sensation, that not necessarily feel good, but it's going to start sending messages through your body. It's going to start making your blood rush through your different extremities, giving them the tingling sensation. So it's going to go to your core structures because it's getting you ready to either fight or flight, run away from whatever it is that's giving you that fear. So that is why once the dopamine and the cortisol and the endorphins start running through your body, you're either stuck in the freeze sensation where you don't necessarily know what to do, but at the same time, you're not trying to make a very rash decision. Your five senses are taking note. You're seeing more clearly, you're hearing more clearly, but at the same time, the cortisol is running through your body. You're starting to feel the tingling in your legs, in your fingers. You want to essentially get ready to run if you need to. And then the dopamine comes in, and all of those together at the end, once you make it out of whatever it was giving you that fear sensation, all of those have now given you almost an addicted sensation, because at the same time, what you don't know is that you are in a state of hypnosis, because all of that is leading to an overload of all of your senses. You are essentially in an anxiety state, even though you are enjoying what it is that you're doing. So you will be in a horror movie and you'll be so glued to it that when someone jumps in the movie or someone screams, you want to scream with them, you jump with them. You are now in your subconscious, and all of that is being ingrown into a default system, which then wants you to keep coming back for more and more. So, side note, a good thing to do on a first date or in the beginning stages of your dating, if you really like this person and you want to harness a connection, take them to go see a horror movie, take them to a haunted house, go to an amusement park, go on a roller coaster, one of the scariest roller coasters. Gently slide your hand over, hold her hand or hold his hand, and start creating, you'll create those bonds, because you've gone through that scary situation. You have made it out of that scary situation. And now you guys have a tale, something that you could tell together for years down the road. Let's say you guys get married. It's actually a really fun trick. It starts to bring in the dark side, and it just, I don't know if anybody out there feels the same way going down roller coasters, but I do, and I almost can't describe it, but that is what happens when you start going through fear, and why we get so addicted to fear. It's kind of short and sweet, like me, but not. So, yeah.
That's so cute. It reminds me of like immediately when you said that, it's like, oh, protection. So there's like your knight in shining arm, like your prince, right? You're protecting you from this roller coaster. And then immediately what I got, it's like, oh, it's a romantic trauma bond.
Yes, exactly. That is, yes. So please, people, don't use this for the bad. Don't manipulate somebody with this fact. But yeah, it does of sorts create a trauma bond, but trauma bonds could be good or bad, depending on if you're working through something that brings out a greater sense of yourself, your purpose, and your path.
I love it. Well, actually, I'm gonna share really quickly. When I was dating my husband, one of our first dates that we went to was we went to SeaWorld. And they don't have a lot of amusement park um like rides, but we went to this particular ride and something malfunctioned while we were on top. So we kind of had to, like, they were unloading everyone slowly, like one at a time. And like the whole time I'm like freaking out and I'm trying to like hold it together because I'm like, I can't let him know I'm freaking out. And then he's also freaking out, and he's actually freaking out way more than me. And I don't know this, right? Like, so we're both kind of like sitting next to each other, looking at each other, like just kind of forced laughing. But we were pretty much dying. After getting off, he just like, because he made me feel so good. We get off the ride and he was like, oh, finally. And like all his anxiety, like I can see even he got like color back into he was all pale. And we've told this story over and over, and I didn't realize that's what happened. We bonded at that time because we were taking care of each other, and we're like, it's okay. And we were like doing like little silly, like, like joking about it. Well, what if we're the ones that get stuck up here? And I was like, no, don't say that. And obviously we don't talk like that anymore. But yeah, that reminded me of that. Like, we trauma bonded right there. And it is a nice story to tell your kids. And so interesting that I'm a Pisces sun in the 8th house, and SeaWorld, which is Pisces energy. That's where, so that event actually triggered my 8th house. I just connected the dots right there. Thank you, Crystal.
Anytime,
I
Crystal.
love
You've helped me connect so many dots in this lifetime, and probably many others. So,
Oh, same. For
Thank,
sure.
thank you, ladies. Well, that was so Interesting. I love that connection. And I mean, it makes sense, right? With the like how fear and everything that it does to our body, and why there's so many people in love with horror movies. That is actually everything that you said is the reason I cannot watch horror movies, because I really feel like I embody them. So I loved learning all about it.
Oh, for sure. And I wanted to also, Crystal, that trick-or-treating law didn't come into effect until 2008. So it was, you were good. You weren't breaking the law
Okay,
when you were a kid.
2008. Oh, that's yeah,
Wow.
okay. So back in the days. But you know the one that got me when she said ugly people, I was like, so what is ugly people?
Yeah.
Like, how do you know you're ugly? Like, what if I think I'm pretty and you're like, no, she's ugly, give her a ticket. Like, no.
Oh yeah, I lost it on that one too. I'm glad I was muted because you would have heard like a big, huge laugh. Yeah, beauty is subjective. So yeah, how do you like? Is there criteria? I'd
Yes,
like to know more
exactly.
about
Do they have a
that.
sketch?
No, no, there's actually not. And I found that while I was doing a brief stint in paralegal classes. I had to find like weird laws for where the in the town the college was in, and it was in Elgin. So I was like, what? It was really weird.
That yeah, that one's a good one. That's weird, and it's like, okay, so I want the definition.
Yeah.
But I know we wanted to share a little bit of spooky stories, right? I want to go first, and then Stacey can share what's been happening to her, because my story is more of like the past, and Stacey's is actively experiencing.
Oh
So,
yeah.
um, during this time, like for me, we traditionally we always had this a few stories that happen, that get told over and over, chupacabra, different things. But for me, it was La Llorona, which was this woman that was so sad. So I'm just doing it really quickly in a nutshell, because that's not mainly the theme of what I want to say. But we were all gathered together. My cousins were talking about La Llorona. Oh, she's gonna come and get you. And she's a woman that regretted drowning her children. So she would cry for them, and you can hear her like, oh, all night, right? So I remember this specific day because we had all gone trick-or-treating, and we were at my aunt's house, and my mom and her sisters were all kind of settling in from taking us out walking around the neighborhood. And my cousins are, we're telling spooky stories. And I go home, and it's already late, probably like 11-ish for a 12-year-old. And I used to share a room with my sister. And we had this dimming light that would, like, you would, instead of switching on and off, you would kind of like turn it, and it dims the light, makes it whatever. So my sister's like, I'm taking a shower. She's in the shower. I go in my room. And as a preteen, we close the door. We like slam the door closed. So I did that. I remember doing that really clearly. And I turned off the light because I was going to bed. Like, I'm tired. I'm going to bed. So I'm lying there in bed, and I kind of can't sleep. I feel like this feeling. I keep on thinking of the Llorona. I'm like, oh, and all of a sudden, the light just turns on slowly. And then I was like, sister, and nothing, right? And I can see now at this point because the light's on, and I get up really quick, go towards the door, and it's locked, like it's closed. So then I open the door and I look out, and pretty much everything's dark, everyone's in their room, and I can still hear the shower. So I go to the bathroom and I knock on the door. I was like, sister, are you there? She's like, yeah, I'm taking a shower. And I was like, did you get out of the room and turn on the light? And I just remember her just like pulling the curtains to the side, and she has shampoo all over her hair. She's like, why would I do that? And then like she closes the curtains back, and I just like went into the room and I turned the light all like big, and I was like, I can't go to sleep until she's in here. So to me, that was one of the spookiest things ever, because I can never explain how this dimmer light turned on its own. And I could have swore, like I was up and down telling this story to my mom, and mom was like, "Oh, maybe you're just imagining things. Maybe you just thought you dimmed it." I was like, "No, it was pitch black. I remember going to bed. It was off and it turned on its own." So it was always a mystery on how that happened. But I wanted to share that because to this day, I cannot have dimmer lights in my house because I do not want to experience that. And the whole connection of turning a light on and off in the dark, like it always kind of triggers something in me. Like it triggers a childhood trauma. Like, oh, it's dark, run upstairs where the light's at. So that's my spooky story. Not super, super spooky, but I mean, for a 12-year-old, I think that was scary enough.
How terrifying though, like just to be in there. I know I've had some experiences at that age, and it's always worse because you're a kid, you're young, you're impressionable, and you don't know really what's going on.
And
And
then
then,
no one believes you.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I know. Because I used to have stuff going on when I was a little kid, and my mom told me, well, that's just the house settling. Like, well, then why does it sound like somebody with cowboy boots walking across the roof? Or cloven hoof. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like I used to have stuff like that, but like, yeah, right. What's going on now at my house is whew, the activity, I think, between the solar eclipse and now is really I feel like it's kicking up a lot because we've got a bunch of new experiences. And so I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on in my house too. And it's been happening since we moved in. I live in a row house. So a lot of the noises, you got to kind of go, was that the neighbors or was that happening in the house? But there are some that are like, definitely, no, 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 no. That was in the middle of the room. We have things that get knocked over. Just yesterday, I had something in my garage get knocked over while I was down in my office, which is the room next door to my garage. And I usually keep the door open so that the animals can wander in and out. But like I looked over and all three of my animals are laying on their bed, and a lantern that I had just sitting up on a shelf fell over and broke yesterday. And that's not the first time that that's happened. A couple of weeks ago too, I had something similar. A lot of the activity is in the garage because we know for a fact that someone committed suicide in the garage. And I didn't find that out until 3 weeks after I moved into the place, and my security system was going off like in the middle of the night because the door between the garage and my office was opening and it would catch it on security. And so I put a camera down in the room that it was happening in, and I watched the door, and it's one of those doors, the hinges automatically close it, and it's kind of heavy, so you really have to push really hard to keep it open. And it's a solid door too, so it's a nice, good, heavy door. But I caught video of the door opening up all the way, sitting there for like about 5 seconds, and then slowly closing, which is impossible because I thought maybe it was the wind or something, like the pressure in the garage changing it. Maybe the door wasn't all the way click shut or something at first. So I just wanted to catch that and rule it out. And then there's been times where I've been sitting upstairs and I can see straight down the stairs to the front door. And I remember one night I was sitting there and I look over and I see the deadbolt turning. It unlocks and I see the doorknob turn and the door opens and I'm expecting somebody to be there. And nobody. The door opened and it closed. And again, because that's got the same kind of hinges, it automatically closes, door closed. And I'm like, what the hell? And so I go run down there to lock the door again, and it's locked. And I'm like, okay, did I just see that? So I went and checked my security system. It logged the opening and the shut. And I'm like, oh my God. So now what's going on? And like, we've heard like disembodied voices in the stairwell. Like there's been like, and all the time, my daughter and I will hear like, did you just call my name? I just heard my name called. That happens like 2-3 times a day, some days. And at this point, we're just used to it. Like we'll hear little noises. The toaster oven will go on and off. My dogs are terrified of our main floor bathroom. They won't even go in there. And we found out that's because the previous owner, the reason why they put the house up for sale was the previous owner, the wife went into hospice and the husband was there by himself, and they were an elderly couple. Their son is the one who committed suicide in the garage. But he had been alone, and they ended up having to do a welfare check on him, and they found him in that bathroom, and he had been there for 3 days with a broken hip, and he couldn't move. And you just really get that, like when I first moved in, you just really got that feeling of like hopelessness and despair in that room. And, then I talked to one of my neighbors and they told me about everything that happened. I'm like, oh, okay, that's why all this stuff is going on. But now we're seeing, my daughter has seen a mist in her room, and it's very like, it's weird. It's not just like, when you blow smoke out or something, it kind of billows at the end. This is like at the end, it's like a trail of smoke where like, kind of like a jet engine where the trail is behind it. That's what this looks like. And then, what was it, 2-3 nights ago? I had an orb in my room. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw this orb floating in my room. Like, okay, that's new. But none of it really seems scary at
No,
all.
it
Like
doesn't.
I don't feel like I'm in danger. I don't feel like it's malevolent or anything like that. They're just there. They just want you to know that they're there, kind of stuff. Like that's all I feel that's going on. I don't ever feel bad at all.
And have you
Um,
done anything like to cleanse the area, or you just kind of embraced it?
we cleanse our house regularly. Like
Okay.
we'll sage or do I use my tuning forks sometimes. And then I think we really want to do, we found one tradition, Samhain tradition on like if you open up a window on the west side of your house and put a candle in there, it's supposed to lead the spirits home and out of your house. So we're going to try that if it's warm enough. It's snowing right now. So hopefully on Halloween, it will be warm enough, because that is one tradition I found. And if that doesn't work, then we're going to do that Lemurian thing that I talked about with spitting black beans, because that just sounds weird enough for me to try.
Yeah. Well,
But
wrap
and we're gonna wait, and we'll wait till the Roman festival of the dead on May 13th, which just happens to be my birthday. And oddly enough, I was actually married on Halloween, so that's my connection to Halloween.
wow. That's cool though. That is very cool and kind of like synchronistic at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But just thank you for sharing that. And I kind of want to just jump in really quickly on a ritual that I would advise when cleansing. I love rosemary. So I love sage. I love saging, but during this time I always use rosemary. I actually plant a rosemary. I have a rosemary potted right by my door. And this is more of a passed down tradition from my grandma. She was a curandera, and she says planting rosemary by your door not just protects your home, but also attracts abundance and luck. So I remember her always having a rosemary by her door and also a lemon tree. So they were always by the door. It was a thing that she would do.
Hmm.
And she would get like a sprig and then light it up and go around the house with it. And I would ask her, what is she doing? She's like, oh, I'm cleaning. My grandma was not one that had a lot of words, so she would just be like cleaning. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I had to take that explanation and not ask any more questions because then she'll like, start to nag. So she's like, I'm cleaning. And my head is like, how are you cleaning? And now that I'm on to these spiritual practices, I realized, oh, she was cleansing the space, not just with a broom. Yes, you do want to use your brooms during this time. That's another ritual. Yes, they're connected with witches, but I consider myself a cosmic witch. So yes, sprinkle salt all over your house and then sweep it up. And as you're sweeping, you're just like cleansing everything and just like getting rid of the old and uncovering things and then you put it all in the trash can. Make sure that you take that trash out immediately because you don't want all these things that you collected in the home that are stagnant energy and then just leave it there sitting in the trash, right? So take it out to your big trash outside. And those are the things that I do. So I get that sprig of rosemary from my little potted rosemary and cleanse the entire house with salt.
Mm. I've heard the rosemary, but I've never tried it. So I think maybe I'll go out today and see if I can find a rosemary plant.
That'll be cute. That'll be your tradition for this year. You
Mm-hmm.
just started that new tradition.
Mm-hmm. I really want to spit black beans out of my mouth.
Yeah, no, that sounds cooler. Yes, split black beans, and then after that, sweep them up, and you'll combine all of them, and
We'll
then
throw some salt on it,
yeah,
rosemary.
exactly.
Oh,
Now, lastly, um, I I know that we have a few episodes coming up, and these are not going to be our special episodes. We're like broadcasting back to normal. So we have Venus and Libra coming up. So check us out. Make sure to follow us, like, and comment below. Let us know some of your spooky stories. Crystal, Stacey, and I will be on like the watch out for any comments that you type so we can comment back. And we love hearing from you guys and you sharing your stories. Anything else you wanted to say, Stacey or Crystal?
no, I think you covered it all. Yeah, I want to hear your spooky stories too.
No, yeah, I'm totally interested in hearing everybody's spooky stories. Those are always a lot of fun. And I also use them as a tool to kind of regress my own mind back to scenarios where I didn't know if I felt something or if it was off, and hearing from others and what they've been through, then I'm like, oh, that actually was. So it's that those are always very helpful, and I enjoy hearing spooky stories.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was amazing, Stacey. Thank you for putting it together and for hitting us up and letting us know, hey, I want to do a Halloween special, gals. So I love the fact that you came up with this and I truly enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for going along. And you guys, I loved all of the stuff that you guys brought to it too. I loved hearing about why we get scared and what's really going on in our minds. And I love to hear like the actual traditions and what's going on cosmically. So that was awesome. Super awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And if you guys are ever curious of getting a reading or a hypnosis, go to the description. If you're listening on YouTube, we'll have all the information there. You can reach out to Stacey, Crystal, and I. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and have a safe Halloween.
Yes, everyone, happy Halloween. Be safe.
Happy Halloween.